everyone, and welcome. Now today we are going to do another book video. I really have been wanting to do more book content. I enjoy making it. It seems like some of you enjoyed watching it as well. I am coming down with a little bit of a cold, as you can probably hear me, so I hope you don't mind. I just really didn't want to miss a day of recording. Now, I think this is going to be kind of like a two-part type thing, where first we will go through everything that is physically on this bookshelf, and then in the second part kind of reorganize it, because this isn't really in much of any special organization. It's kind of organized generally by like type or genre, I guess, but other than that there's really nothing here. So let's just go ahead and go through literally every book that's on the shelf. Okay, so just starting up here on the most upper left is a book called Countdown 1945. It says the extraordinary story of the atomic bomb and the 116 days that changed the world. I just kind of saw this at the thrift store and it looked interesting to me, so that's why I grabbed it. There are some books on this shelf like that. I get a lot of books at the thrift store, and one year, shortly, I don't know, it was like my husband and I's second apartment ever, I think. We went to the local library and they were having this huge book, I say book sale, but it was basically just all by donation. So we grabbed a bunch of books, left a donation, so there's kind of some random things on here. Okay, and the only reason I'm going to talk about this next book is because if you can see it, or you see it in any of the clips, I don't want you to wonder why I skipped over it. And it's not actually a book. My husband's grandmother just made this one year as kind of a funny little fun gift, where it's like a little secret hidey book. We of course don't use it. There's nothing in here, but I don't know. It's just kind of a funny thing. Now, the next book that's up here is Super Forecasting, The Art of Science and Prediction. Some of these books too are books that my husband picked out and put on here, and I honestly can't remember if this is one that I picked out or if this is one, I think it might have been one that he picked out. Next is just this book called You Got That, Cindy. There's kind of a not a long story, but a story that's not super relevant to this book, but it's kind of I don't want to call it a self-help book, but it is a really great perspective just on life and dealing with your experiences and your emotions, and really just finding accountability and connection and just like a whole bunch of things. I know the person who wrote it. I don't know how popular or well known this book is, so I don't know. Next we have Once a Runner. My husband actually got this in a book exchange with someone that he knew. He sent them 3 books and they sent him 3 books, but it's basically like a true story memoir type thing about a person who is a runner. Then I have on here In the Shadow of a Man by Jane Goodall. This is a book I actually read in college. That's why all of these tabs are in here. So some of the books that I have on this shelf are books that I have already read. But I really loved this book. It was a really cool, like, just interesting perspective, and one thing that I found especially fascinating about it is that one thing I didn't realize is that Jane Goodall is an incredible woman, but her situation at the same time was like all these perfect pieces kind of falling into place, and it's just really fascinating to look at how different things are today, and like her story and her situation of how she got into the place that she got into and all of that. I just don't think would happen today. There's so much regulation and stuff, and I think it exists for a really good reason, but that was just one thing that I found really fascinating about this book and about Jane Goodall that I just didn't realize before. This is just another book that was just, it was either at the thrift store or that big book sale that I talked about, House of Sand and Fog. I have not read it, but my husband has, and he really enjoyed it. This is a poem book called Dog Songs by Mary Oliver. I love Mary Oliver. She's probably one of my favorite poets. And I also read this at a pretty difficult time. Like I bought this shortly after I lost my dog. And this book of poems was what I needed from it at the time, if that makes any sense. I have these two books. I guess there might be more, I actually don't know, by Ruby. I don't know how to say it. I wasn't fully prepared to say it, so I don't want to be, you know, rude or anything, but of course Milk and Honey and the Sun and Her Flowers. I don't think I've finished. I might have finished this one, but I don't think I finished this one. I really like the cover, which is why you probably noticed I had it facing out on the bookshelf. I almost don't want to say it. I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion or not, but I actually found these to be a little bit overrated. I think that there are some really, really beautiful pieces in each, and I think those are the ones that you kind of have seen on the internet that got really popular and like go viral and all of that. But honestly, I guess the rest of them were just kind of a bit of a letdown for me. They didn't really feel, I don't know, I don't want to, it doesn't feel quite right to judge someone's poetry, especially because I think a lot of these are really personal to her, and because of that, I don't feel like I have the right to say that it's good or bad. It just wasn't for me. They didn't really feel like poems. They just kind of felt like statements out of someone's journal or something, and not that that can't be a beautiful thing. I just don't know that it's quite worth such high ratings and appraisal. This is one that's on here of my husband's Shit My Dad Says that we also got at a thrift store. I have not read it. I don't think he has either, but I think that there are quite a bit of people who like this. It's just like a funny little read. And then another one of my husband's that I have not read. I don't know that I will read it, but it's on here, so I wanted to mention it. This is Wally Lamb. I know this much is true. Now this is, it looks like, it seems to be like a kind of old copy, which is kind of neat, but I got this at the thrift store because we had a copy before. My husband read it and he actually sent it on his book exchange, so I didn't get a chance to read it, so I saw another copy of it at the thrift store for like $1, so I picked it up. Okay, continuing on. 3 books here by Preston and Child. These were again ones that we got at a thrift store, and I actually went through the bookshelf kind of recently and just got rid of some books. We had like way too many and ones that we were just never gonna read. But these ones I kept because they are kind of like murder mystery type books, which I tend to like, so I think that I might like them. It's Still Life with Crows, Brimstone, and True Cabinet of Curiosities. So I don't have necessarily any plans to read them anytime soon, but I think I will like them when I get around to them. Next is Handmaid's Tale, which we already talked about in another video, so we will just move on from that one. World War Z is one kind of like a post-apocalyptic zombie type situation. Again, my husband has read this one. He got it in the book exchange. I have not read it. I might read it. I don't know. It's not like I'm super, super curious. I've watched the movie, but I don't know. It's one that we'll probably keep just in case, but yeah. Then next is 3 Cups of Tea. I'm not really going to say too much about this one because I don't know a ton of what it's about. I just know that it's a pretty remarkable story from what everything I've heard, and again, it was at a thrift store, so I picked it up and I will read it at some point. Again, I don't necessarily have plans, like super specific plans of what I'm going to read in any particular order, but yeah, I do plan on reading this at some point. Gillian Flynn, Sharp Objects. She's of course the author of Gone Girl. I don't really know what this one is about either, but I am pretty excited to read it. I actually haven't read Gone Girl either. I've watched it. We had a copy. I don't think we have it anymore because I think it's one that my husband sent in the book exchange before I got a chance to read, which is totally fine because I'm sure I'll be able to find another copy of it at the thrift store. I got this one at a thrift store. Again, another book that I honestly have no idea what it's about, but just saw it at a thrift store and was interested in reading it. It says, rural Kentucky in the 1950s is not an easy place to grow up, and it's especially hard for 10-year-old Icy Sparks, an orphan who lives with her grandparents. Life becomes even more difficult for Icy when violent tics and uncontrollable cursing begin. Symptoms brought on by a troubling affliction that goes undiagnosed until her childhood. So it goes on from there, but I just thought I'd give you a little peek about peek into what it is about, because like I said, I have no idea. Again, we already talked about this one, How to Overcome Your Childhood, so I won't get into that one again. The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I probably will read this one on the sooner side of things, because I read in that last book video that I made my 1/3 of the year wrap up, I talked about I almost said The Handmaid's Tale, The Maidens, which is also by him, and I really liked that book, and it was like an easier, kind of quicker read to get through, so I'll probably give this one a read sometime soon as well. And this book is actually kind of how I ended up reading The Maidens, because Rachel Catherine, that I talk about all the time on YouTube, she read both of them, and she kind of said that this one was tended to be really popular, but she actually liked The Maidens more. And The Maidens kind of spoke out to me, like jumped out to me a little bit more than this one, so that's why I went with that one first. But I ended up really liking it, so this I saw at the thrift store and decided to grab it because I figured I would like it. The Catcher in the Rye, this is a book I read in high school, but I probably will read it again at some point in my life, just because it's, I feel like, kind of a classic to read. And I saw it at the thrift store, and I thought it was a pretty cool copy and print of it, so I grabbed it. This book is called The World as We Know It. Again, this is actually a book written by somebody that my husband, like, is from the same very small town that my husband is from, so it's kind of a cool thing. I have not read it. I don't think my husband's read it either, but it has a lot of really positive like praise and stuff, so I'm sure that it's a good book. And what's pretty cool about it is that it talks about, it's based in rural New Hampshire, which is where we are both from, so it's just kind of a fun thing to have in a book, and I'm sure it'll be cool to read about it too, because there aren't a lot of places that are kind of based in that setting, so you don't get to read about it a lot. So kind of excited to check out that eventually. Cloud Atlas, I have not read. My husband has read and absolutely loved it. One of those books I'm not sure that I will read. There's other things that I guess I'd rather read first, but it's certainly not a book that I would, say I'm never going to read or anything like that. The Kite Runner is another book that I read in high school. I don't know that I will read it again, but it just was a book that I saw at the thrift store and felt like I wanted to have it on my bookshelf. I don't know. I remember when I read it, there were a lot of really powerful quotes and scenes and moments and stuff in this book, so I think I probably will read it again at some point in my life, but again, not something that I'm necessarily prioritizing. Then we have Stephen King, Misery, which I have read and really, really enjoyed. I won't get too much into it. I feel like you kind of know what Stephen King books are about at this point. John Irving, A Widow for a Year. I have not read this. Again, found it at a thrift store and ended up buying it, just based on some other John Irving books. John Steinbeck, Of Mice and Men. I actually I don't know, it just really is a classic that is a classic for a good reason, and I feel like if you have read it, then there's something about it that, I don't know, pulls at the heartstrings so much. 18 Best Stories of Edgar Allan Poe. Again, thrift store find. You can tell it's actually looks quite old. Let's see if I can find a date or anything on here. Okay, yeah, in the 60s. So this was printed in the 60s, which I feel like it shows. It's got like these green pages, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I actually kind of forgot this was on here. Five People You Meet in Heaven. Again, just kind of like a classic. I think my husband really likes this. I have not read it. I listened to it actually one time when my husband and I were driving back up from Florida. And then kind of in the same vein, we have For One More Day, which is also by the same author. And then this big book is another Stephen King book, and this is Needful Things, which is bigger than it looks. This section here is definitely more of like the fantasy section, although this, well, it is a fantasy book, but I just put it that way because I cannot get enough of this cover. I have not read the book. I mentioned it in that other video. I plan to read this one sometime in the near future, but I haven't gotten to it yet, and it's like the only book that I ever bought new or anything just because I liked the way it looked. And even underneath this sleeve is just like the most, I don't know, it's so simple, but I just love this like beautiful green. And I don't know, you probably won't be able to tell, but there's like these inlays of a bird and a dragonfly and a bee, and it's just so pretty. And I actually don't know if I'm going to pull these off because I don't know if you really need to see them, but this is the A Song of Ice and Fire series here. So this is the 5 books that are currently out, and then this is the Lord of the Rings series here in The Hobbit. This I actually will probably read also sometime in the near future. Okay, we are getting to the end, especially because these are actually just all textbooks, with the exception of this. Textbooks and like manuals, stuff like that. This is like just a bird guidebook, so not really anything that is interesting to look at. I mean, it's interesting, but it's like biochemistry textbook, so we're not going to talk about it. But moving along, we have The Watchmen, which is this is the graphic novel. I'm sorry, I just got so distracted because I didn't ever notice this writing in the back, which I don't know if that's just part, that must just be part of the book. I don't know the story. But yeah, this is the graphic novel that this show is based on. So my husband really enjoyed this. I have not read it. I don't know that I will. I tend not to be as interested in like violence and stuff like that, but I don't know, maybe someday. Then the next one on here is another book that my husband actually really loved. I have not read it, but I think I will just because I kind of enjoy this cover quite a bit. And Attack on Titan, just one of many. My husband really likes these. I have not read it, probably won't, not as interested. And then this is just another book that my husband bought, The Art of War. Then we have The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest and The Girl Who Played with Fire. And I actually just remembered that in the box behind me at the thrift store the other day, I just bought The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo to kind of complete, I think it's just the 3 of them to complete that set. Then we have, again, The Maidens, which I won't talk about, East of the Mountains, and The Wheel of Darkness. These are both books that were thrift store finds. And we have Brad Thor, Act of War, and I'm honestly not sure where this one came from. I don't know if it was given to us or if we got this at a thrift store. And I honestly don't even know what it's about, so I can't tell you if I will read it or not. And then we have just some different kind of spiritual and like crystal and moon type books. And you may or may not believe in anything like that. I just think that anything that there is to learn about is interesting to learn about, so whether or not I necessarily believe, I don't think is relevant, because I just think it's fascinating to learn about anything in the world. So I find books like this interesting, and then there are actually some more up at the top that you probably can't see, but just some more similar like spiritual geometry books, type stuff like that. And then lastly, there is this Jerusalem set, which my husband is currently reading, and he is really enjoying it so far. I honestly don't know what it's about. and don't know if I will ever read it or not, but he is really enjoying it so far. And then lastly, I got these also recently at the thrift store. I got this copy of It, which I am pretty excited to read. I have watched it, of course, the old ones, the old one and the new one, but I am excited to read the book as well. And then I have these 3 copies of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark that I also got at the thrift store, and I really just got them. I'm excited to read them again. I'll probably read them on like Halloween or something, but this was like 2 of my best friends when we were younger, our favorite freaking thing to read, and we would just read them over and over and over and over again. So I want to do like a little Halloween thing with them this year where we just kind of like sit down and read these again, because I think that would be pretty fun. That's all I have for this video though, and we are definitely going to do another part where we reorganize this, because it was not organized before, and it's even more of a mess now that I just pulled everything off and tried to put it back on quickly. So I will see you in that next video very soon. Goodbye.